Hey everyone, Walsh and Cody here from Thin Line Defense, and welcome to our next episode in our low power variable optics series. In this episode, we're going to be reviewing the Primary Arms 1x6 Raptor in second focal plane. Now I want to say that this entire series on low power variable optics is sponsored by Primary Arms. They provide us with all the optics that we're going to be testing throughout this entire series. And also by Wheeler Tools, who provide us with all the tools that we need to install all these optics properly on our rifles. We'll provide links to all the products that are shown throughout this entire low power variable optics series, and we'll put links to them down in the comments. But for now, let's get to that second focal plane, Primary Arms 1x6 Raptor. Before we get into the unboxing though, I want to explain to you some of the differences between first focal plane and second focal plane. Now last week, as we talked about, we had the first focal plane optic. This time we're going to be showing the second focal plane. Now some of the differences in second focal plane is when you actually go through those magnification ranges. When you move to the magnification, the reticle is going to remain the same size throughout the magnification changes. So that means the reticle is going to be the same size at 1x as it's going to be at 6x. But this causes a couple challenges you need to be aware of. Because it uses the Primary Arms ACSS reticle, you have to realize that those ACSS bullet drop markings only apply when that reticle is at its full magnification. So remember that. If you have a 1x6, then that means your ACSS reticle will only work when it's at 6 power. Same as if it's a 1x8, you need to put it at max magnification if you're going to use that bullet drop that is on that ACSS reticle. Now though, let's tear into it. Let's set it up and unbox it. So similar to the first focal plane we did last week, this cantilever mount is also 30 millimeters, so make sure you know that. Let's take a look at this Primary Arms Raptor 1x6 in second focal plane. So here's the instructions first. Let's see what's in here. So here's the actual optic here, how to achieve a clear reticle picture, the actual reticle illumination here. Here's the bullet characteristics if you need to know how to establish your zero with your particular bullet, and how to adjust your point of impact. Just remember though, it adjusts in 1/4 inch increments for each click of the dial. And then we get into the actual reticle. You can see some of the hash marks and some of the vertical and horizontal ranging. This shows you some of the wind holds. We'll get into all this. How to lead your target. There's actually some markings on there. I'll show you how all this works. And like I said, the vertical and horizontal auto ranging. This is really neat. We'll go over the reticle in detail. And these are the actual specifications on the Primary Arms Raptor 1x6 in second focal plane. If you want to pause the video here and know any of the details of the actual optic. Alright, let's talk about instructions. Let's get this scope out. So let's get it out of this wrapper. It always comes wrapped up in these nice things. So, wow, just like last week on that first focal plane Raptor, it just looks amazing. I love that deep black, and I love how it has these caps built in. It just makes it so much easier to keep tabs on them. And they sit securely and flip up easily. They're really pretty nice. You can also remove them if you need to adjust the diopter. It's smooth and easy to move around, so there's no problem here. Here's the magnification adjustment. It's not too loose or too tight. It's pretty perfect. Over here on the side is our windage adjustment, so we can remove this just like on the other one. See, we got that 2032 battery hidden in there like we learned last week. And if we remove the top elevation adjustment, we can see where we can adjust that elevation here. Moving that knob clockwise will move it down, and counterclockwise will move it up. And then on the other side, clockwise will move it to the left, counterclockwise will move it to the right. Just remember though, you're moving the point of impact and not the actual reticle itself. Now the illumination doesn't have an on-off in between, so you got to go all the way around if you want to change it back to 0. Here we have our battery compartment. Let's go ahead and open this up. Yep, inside here, just like before, standard 2032 battery. Just like the first focal plane we did previously, this thing just looks amazing. All the features are awesome. It's really a great optic for the price. Let's go try it out. Alright, so before we get into the install, let me show you how this reticle works. There's some pretty cool things we can use similar to the first focal plane. We can use some ranging on the reticle itself to determine how far away your target is. So let me show you how that works real quick. So the second focal plane optic does some interesting things that the first focal plane didn't do. Since the optic doesn't change size, the reticle itself becomes much larger, which enables you to engage targets much more quickly, as it's easier to put that target inside the horseshoe. It also has horizontal and vertical auto ranging. So if you're trying to mark a target, you can use the vertical auto range to determine how tall a target is and then move it to the specified markings on the actual reticle. And then range the next target, adjust accordingly, and take the shot. Similarly, you can also use the horizontal ranging if you have a target and you need to measure it. Each of the markings indicates an 18-inch wide target, so you can just measure it in the center, see which one would fit an 18-inch target, and then use that proper distance marking in order to engage your target. But what if you have wind? Just like last week, we showed that this reticle easily adjusts for winds. So you range your target, and then you can make that adjustment with the windage to mark where you need to according to the particular height and wind range estimation. The wind markers uses 5 and 10 mile per hour markings. So if there's a 7.5 mile per hour wind, you just put it between the 5 and 10 mile per hour markers.
All right, now that we've gone through the reticle, let's install it.
Alright, so let's get this thing set up. So first thing we gotta do is remove our old optic. It's time for some upgrades. So we can just take this off. Make sure to use the right tools whenever you're doing this. Next we're gonna grab our tools from our Wheeler toolkit and go ahead and remove this Magpul backup iron sight, because this is just gonna get in the way. And then we can install our mount. Like I said before, just finger tight it so that way we can remove everything and set everything up. Go ahead and loosen everything up so you can remove those top caps. Just set those to the side because we're going to be needing those in just a moment once we line everything up. And then just remove all the other screws and then remove the other top cap. Now we can place the actual optic in. Remember though, we're going to want to tighten things down, but keep it loose enough where we can adjust for eye relief. So then reinstall your top caps on either side. Just make sure to push down the center so that you get it even on both sides and there's not a gap on one side. And then just finger tight those down, same as we did on the first focal plane video. And you can check it to make sure it's in a good spot as if you have some movement to adjust that optic back and forth. So as we talked about last week when we did the first focal plane optic, make sure to sit behind the rifle even if you think you have the eye relief perfect. You may not have any scope shadow if you're standing with the rifle, but maybe if you're laying prone there could be a ton of scope shadow, and I ran into that before. So make sure to go into multiple positions and then you can lock down that eye relief right in the perfect position. Make sure to torque everything down with the Wheeler fat wrench or an appropriate torque wrench, but also check the diopter to make sure you have your reticle bright within the scope.
All right, range time, let's go zero it.
So the first thing we did was to bore sight the rifle, so we're just making sure to get everything all lined up so that we have the scope and the rifle all zeroed out and married together so that all those bullet drop characteristics on the reticle work properly. Make any small adjustments you may need to get that reticle as clear and crisp as possible. Alright Cody, so now that we've bore sighted and all ready to go, what do you think of the reticle just looking through it?
So I like the horseshoe feature. It draws your eye to the chevron pretty easily rather than just having a small little red dot or a small reticle. It really draws your attention to the center of the scope.
And I'll already note that that reticle is much larger than the first focal plane at 1x, so we may not have some of the problems that we had in the first focal plane video at 1x.
All right, now that we got the rifle zeroed in, let's go ahead and use some of the features in the reticle. We're going to go from the 100-yard zeroed, and we're going to jump to 300 yards. Yeah, I like it.
So as you could tell, Cody was able to zero the reticle and then jump straight to the 300-yard target without any issue. First shot straight out of the rifle, immediately hit the gong. So I'll tell you what, let's challenge him. Let's go do some short range and see how this thing does. All right, Cody, so how did those up-downs feel? Did you have any issues with the eye box or any other problems with that actual optic?
So at the closer ranges, I have no scope shadow, no issues with that. With my background in firearms, I'm used to just using a red dot with no power setting. So at the 1 power setting, this is working out pretty good.
All right, let's open up and see what he can do. So Cody, what were your thoughts on actually engaging with the reticle and with the illumination? With the 1x on the first focal plane, I had a few issues with actual illumination. How did that work for you?
I had no issues with the illumination at this power setting, but let's try some multi-targets.
Okay, so you're pretty fast with that, but let's see you engage a close target and a far target. Cody, what are you doing, man? You were a little slow.
Yeah, that's because it's a silly drill. But what I would normally do is go down to one knee, get a stable platform. I'll show you how to do that. All right, before you guys eat me up in the comments section, I know that that wasn't a perfect platform. My elbow would need to be further in front of my knee. That way you don't have bone-on-bone contact. Go ahead, eat me up. We'll laugh about it later. All right, we ran all these drills at 1x, but what I would normally do is probably run it at a 6x power setting. There's really no reason to go between the 1 and 6 power settings, so I'm just going to leave it at 6 and see how that works. If I get in a close quarter situation, I'm just going to use a scope tube to acquire my target. Let's try the same drills at the 6 power setting.
All right, so what were your thoughts on doing up-downs at a 6 times magnification then?
I had no issues, again, with the reticle, the power settings, and the illumination. So I just was able to quickly acquire the target using the horseshoe reticle, basically boxing in my target and firing.
Well, tell you what, why don't I make you do some multi-target with that then?
Let's do it.
All right, so I have to say, you're dangerously fast at 1x and 6x. But what do you say we give the people what they want? Rapid fire. All right, the second focal plane definitely looks like fun. So Cody, tell me your pros, your cons, and if you recommend it.
So my pros are definitely the reticle. When this ACSS reticle came out, I was super excited. Again, with my background in firearms, I've been trained in just the red dot, so any kind of fancy reticle is going to get me a little excited. Also, the illumination gave me no issues through all the power settings. Finally, let's talk about the con. The one con. Like Walsh mentioned earlier, you got to really use it at the 6 power setting to use the reticle. So that's the only issue. Like I said, I'm going to use it at that 6 power setting, and I still like it.
One thing, and while it is a con, I definitely don't want to mark it as a con to the Primary Arms second focal plane 1x6, because this is actually just a con for most second focal plane. And we'll get into that a little more when we go into the second focal plane versus first focal plane.
All right, finally, do I recommend this scope? I honestly do. This is by far my favorite scope. I got super excited when Primary Arms mailed it to us. I actually put it on my favorite rifle in my arsenal, and it's by far my favorite gun, my favorite setup so far.
So I hope you learned a little bit today about the second focal plane and how that optic works and how it's a little bit different from the first focal plane, and how that second focal plane does have some better illumination, but it has some other challenges as the reticle then remains the same size. So you have to actually zoom in all the way to 6x or to 8x, the maximum magnification of that optic, if you're going to use that bullet drop characteristics in the reticle. So stay tuned for the next episode in our low power variable optic series. In this one, we're going to actually compare and contrast first focal plane versus second focal plane and talk about why we both like the choices that we like, and go head to head and see which one actually works better in different situations. Once again, thanks to Primary Arms for providing us with all the optics we needed for this series, and for Wheeler Tools for helping us set up everything we need to install them correctly. And again, thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. You guys are what makes these reviews possible. Thanks to everyone that likes, comments, and subscribes. We love to hear from you. We love to talk to you. We love to interact with you. And it's absolutely awesome. All right, Walsh and Cody out.
Next time, don't wear this crunchy jacket.